Episode 2 of Percy Jackson and the Olympians, I Become Supreme Lord of the Bathroom, adapts chapters 5 through 9 of The Lightning Thief by Rick Riordan. Percy Jackson, is settling into his new life at Hogwarts. Camp Half-Blood. Dumbledore, Chiron, explains to him that he's a wizard. A demigod. And he'll now be sorted into his house. His cabin. Percy isn't star pupil in any of his classes, except for PE, where he excels at Quidditch. Sword fighting. In the book, we find this out right away. The TV show leaves this part out, which will weaken the ending of the episode. Percy's making friends who are all proudly wearing their Camp Half-Blood merch. Speaking of which, there actually are some really nice costuming and character details in this episode. You see the kids wearing their necklaces with one clay bead for each year they've been to camp. Luke's scar is just visible on his right cheek, and Mr. D has his tiger print shirt. He's also grumpy from having to be sober, and he calls Percy Peter Johnson. Also, remember those blue sweets from episode 1? Percy offers them as a sacrifice to the gods in order to try to get their attention. However, the book is pretty clear that the children of Ares are supposed to be big and ugly. I think the kids they cast have the right attitude and good physical presence, but they definitely weren't ugly. So Percy's made friends, but he's also making enemies. The Slytherin kids, Ares kids, come after him one night so they could administer the time-honored traditional middle school torture known as the swirly. But in a plot twist that has never been repeated before or since, the plumbing decides it's on Percy's side. It's a scene that, both in the book and the TV show, summons up some painful adolescent memories for me. Let's just say it's therapeutic to see the Ares kids take a full blast of toilet water to the face. The TV show really leans into the fact that Percy wants his dad to acknowledge him and pay attention to him. Percy Jackson literally has to do something impressive enough to get the attention of a god. This is less emphasized in the book, but it makes sense for the writers to expand this part of the story as, sadly, lots of viewers will be able to relate. During Capture the Flag, Percy gets ambushed by the group of Ares kids who are eager for revenge after their failed attempt to give him a swirly. This is a great fight scene. Walker Scobell manages to combine action and acting with facial expressions that go from bewildered to frantically making a plan to getting excited as he figures out how to fight. The young actors clearly did a lot of training for the action sequences, and their athleticism makes for very satisfying fights. The only problem is that in the TV show, there's no explanation for Percy's instant fighting skill. In the book, he actually goes to sword fighting class, where he does show surprising natural talent that's likely an inheritance from his mysterious father. So when he holds his own, despite being outnumbered by the literal children of the literal god of war, it's not that surprising. So also in the book, after winning the boss fight against Slytherin House, Ares cabin, a hellhound comes out of nowhere and almost totally eats Percy's face before Chiron saves the day. This isn't in the TV episode, and that's fine. It's a good example of the kind of thing you have to cut in the interest of time. The scene needs to show Percy having his first real fight and then being claimed as a son of the god Poseidon. However, the show should have done a better job of explaining that Percy has natural, or supernatural, shall we say, gifts for sword fighting. There's another change in this scene that I really like. In the book, Annabeth tells Percy to step into the water when he's wounded, as she suspects this will heal him. In the show, she just straight up shoves him. This is great. The action is totally in keeping with her no-nonsense, often callous personality, and it works better for visual storytelling. It's also funnier than what's in the book. This is another great episode. So far, the show is not quite as humorous as the book, but that's probably for the best. I think fiction can have a wider range when it comes to the tone of a story. There's more time to wander between the extremes of humor, sadness, danger, and introspection. TV shows are shorter, so the tone needs to be a little more focused. By avoiding the goofiest stuff, like Grover snacking on scrap metal and laughing with a sound like a goat braying, the show is able to stay grounded while not making the mistake of being darker than it ought to be. Parents and teachers watching along with their kids have a lot of material to work with in this episode. Students can learn a lot about the actual figures of Dionysus and Chiron from Greek mythology. Start with questions like, why is Mr. D wearing a tiger print shirt? And why would he be so grumpy after being banned from drinking wine and being given the job of babysitting demigods? You can also ask students to look up a list of famous heroes that were trained by Chiron. Ask kids to find out why it makes sense that Chiron is always shown smartly dressed in a nice jacket with a white shirt and tie. There are also some good opportunities to talk about the dynamics of preteen and teen life at school. My oldest kid was instantly able to understand the intimidating social scene at Camp Half-Blood, although I did have to explain to her what a swirly was. I guess that's a good sign that bullying is less common these days. For on-screen adaptations of children's books, I give a rating from 1 to 5 Snapes based on the faithfulness to the original story, because Alan Rickman's portrayal of Severus Snape in the Harry Potter series stands as a perfect example of how to adapt a character from the page to the screen. Like Episode 1, I'm giving Episode 2 4 out of 5 Snapes. It's outstanding as a TV episode, particularly the excellent fight scene. There's great attention to little details from the story, but there were some slight departures, such as not quite explaining that Percy has inherent gifts when it comes to water and sword fighting. I also felt that Annabeth was underdeveloped. In the book, she starts mentoring Percy right away, giving him lessons in ancient Greek and befriending him. She's barely in the episode, and she doesn't really engage with Percy socially. What did you think of this episode? Are you having any family or class watch parties of the new series? Let me know which changes you did and didn't like in Episode 2 of Percy Jackson and the Olympians. And as always, thanks for listening.